Hello, everyone. Jason Hagholm here, and today I'm going to recap UFC Vegas 50, but have a special guest with me, one of the best minds that puts mixed martial arts down on the written form. It's Spencer Kyte. Spencer obviously put some great features up on not only the UFC website of pretty much a lot of people fighting on cards, especially last Saturday's UFC Vegas cards, but he's got a great Keyboard Kimura a Substack that you can follow where he's got tons of posts coming up on them, pretty much highlighting the realm of mixed martial arts. Spencer, how are you?
I'm well, man. Thank you for the kind words. Thanks for having me. Glad we're able to finally connect and do this.
Yeah, I'm very excited that we can finally connect and recap a fight night card, Spencer, that delivered and then some. It was action all around the card. And, we were talking just a little off air here, but these fight night cards have just been, there's always something good on them. But if you really looked at this card, Spencer, this was one that I think if you want to call yourself like a true mixed martial arts fan, you needed to sit yourself down on the couch and watch this card, because there's quality fighters that are probably going to be going places either later this year or within the next 5 years. And just the fights themselves delivered.
Yeah, I mean, you can never kind of bank on getting the results that we got. But if you're looking at these cards, and as you said, you're thinking kind of a little bit long term, which is kind of the way I process most of these cards, is what is this event going to tell me about this person that I need to know about for a year from now or 2 years from now. There's a lot of fights, a lot of matchups on this card from the very beginning that were going to be informative, that were going to tell us things about a bunch of these athletes, and some of them that, as you said, have the potential to be contenders here in the next couple of years. And then we also got really entertaining fights, start out with 5 straight finishes, get a bunch of wildness and comebacks and just terrific fights throughout the course of the night. So for me, it's a card that met expectations and exceeded expectations, but one of those ones that just fits with the fight nights so far this year, of just sit down and watch them and give them the opportunity, and you're going to find people that you want to keep following going forward.
100%. Plus, the other factor that we were talking about is these earlier start times. Now, I know it's maybe a little rough for you on the west coast of Canada here, starting at 1 p.m. and pretty much giving up your whole Saturday to watch a UFC event. But for the East Coast time, 4 p.m. start times, and they get right into the action. We're not waiting around till 1:30 at night for these shows to end. You're out of there by 10:30 Eastern, in your case, 7 o'clock. So you've got yourself a whole evening to enjoy the rest of the evening with family or do whatever else you want. I think that's made the viewing experience of these shows a lot more enjoyable than, let's say, a year or even 2 years ago.
Yeah, let me be clear. I'm never going to complain about sitting down to watch fights at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or even some of the international shows where it's been like a 9 o'clock start time, 9 a.m. start time, 10 a.m. start time. I'm all for it. It's just that everyone else in my life that wants to do things, it may compromise situations for them. So it makes the day-to-day for everybody else a little bit more difficult. I just get to sit down and watch fights, which I love to do no matter what. But you're absolutely right. The shift in start times and getting main events and main cards on at an earlier time, so that folks like yourself, so that guys like the Allen brothers out east, so that folks, the guys I talk with every week over at Severe MMA in Ireland and Wales and England, it just makes it a little bit easier to sit down and consume it and enjoy it all, rather than it being, as you said, the 11 p.m. finish. So 12 or 1 for Craig and Matt, and even earlier in the morning for the boys over across the pond. So it's been really great, and I enjoy it as much as it cuts into kind of Saturday afternoon errands and chores around the house. Am I really going to complain that I don't have more time to help clean my house?
And that's what you can make up on Sunday to get doing those chores. But as we look at this card, UFC Vegas 50 from last night, as we said, it was a really great card. If we go from, top to bottom, the main event maybe wasn't the most exciting fight on this card, but it's one that I think in the long run there's going to be a big player coming out of it here, and that's the winner of the main event here in Magomed Ankalev, who he wanted to play the striking game with Thiago Santos early in that second round. He got clipped, And then he was just like, I'm just going to use my Dagestani style wrestling, pin you up against the fence, smother you. And it wasn't the most exciting victory, but it was the smartest way to victory. And Ankalaev puts himself in that bubble of fighting for a light heavyweight title at some point later this year.
Yeah, I would think he really has to. I mean, my takeaway, or the thing I was looking for going in, is can he survive? Can he get through a guy like Thiago Santos? We know the quality that he is. We know sort of the level of where he stands. He's only lost to contenders and current and former champions at that, and has beaten a former champion in Jan Blachowicz. And so for Ankalaev, this was that last step that he needs to clear. And while a lot of people maybe aren't impressed fully with the performance, it's not the highlight reel finish you want to see. It's not the big takeaway moment. It kind of felt like a bit of a letdown versus the rest of the card on Saturday in terms of the effort, but it's 8 straight victories and it's surviving that scare in the second round. And you saw a lot of the pieces that to me make him the most complete fighter in this division and the most overall dangerous fighter in this division. And when you get to where he's at, I just think there's nothing else for him. Like, I can understand the case that people will make for he needs one more, or put him against Anthony Smith or Alexander Rakic or Jan Blachowicz if that fight with Rakic doesn't come together. But at a certain point, you're running the risk of burning out a dude or losing a dude that has won 8 straight fights. And we got to get past the I need to see one more and just give them the opportunity for the one more to be that championship moment that really convinces you. Because to me, it's a bigger deal if he goes out when people are still a little bit underwhelmed and beats the champion than if he goes out and has that highlight reel finish and then doesn't really perform as well against the champion. It becomes kind of a letdown moment. So 8 straight wins, beats a former title challenger, a guy that took John Jones the distance, split decision. It's time. He needs that shot. It's got to come.
Plus, as well, that division right now, light heavyweight, is just so wide open, where we know Glover Teixeira is going to defend the title against Yuri Prohaska in June in Singapore. But then you're in that spot where you're trying to build up those contenders. Ankalaev is one of them, and the guy he just beat now in Thiago Santos, clearly looking like kind of in that gatekeeper role now. If you want to advance and exceed to be in that hunt for a title, you got to get through Thiago Santos, who, let's be real, he hasn't looked the same since coming back from a knee surgery, but UFC always needs someone that's that litmus test to get through if you want to see, the next true contenders in any division, and especially here in light heavyweight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing with the rest of the division is you look at the top 5, nobody else is booked, right? Ankalaev will move into sort of flip spots with Thiago Santos. I think they were 5 and 6 going in the UFC official rankings, which take them for what they are. They'll switch spots. Ankalaev will be top 5. No one else is booked outside of Yuri Prohaska, who's got that title fight coming up with Glover. And so that's another piece of the reason why you just, to me, move forward with Ankalaev. But in regards to Santos, you're 100% right. Every division needs that guy. We have them elsewhere. We need to know, you need to beat a guy like that to prove the quality that you are. And while it sucks to be that guy, and I remember I talked to Rafael dos Anjos prior to his last fight, and we had that conversation, right? You seem to be this guy that they want to keep running these young guys at. And he said, I appreciate it. Absolutely, I take pride in it, but I don't want to be just that guy. I want to prove that I'm a contender as well. Thiago Santos is in that spot now. I think he's got to do a little bit more kind of understanding that maybe that time of being a contender is gone and reassess. But there were still moments on Saturday where we saw that Thiago Santos of old. And I really wonder if it's a little bit of still not trusting his body, still being a little leery of getting into these firefights and getting into these big exchanges that carry the great potential, but also the great potential for harm. And so if there's a little piece that he can flip, because it's not far, and especially in this division, and especially with the power he carries, he could be that guy, as you said, that's the litmus test, but he's still not far from just connect with one and he's right back in there. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him going forward, because it's been, as you said, an unfortunate run since that John Jones fight and the multiple knee surgeries.
Yeah, for Santos, if you look at his record, he's now lost one, but he's lost 3 of his last 4, and that lone win is the Johnny Walker win, which wasn't the most impressive performance as well, but a win is a win. And that, he, as you said, Spencer, he did have that moment in that second round where he stole the second round on my scorecard, dropping Ankalev, but Ankalev made the adjustments, and I don't know. We'll see. This division right now is basically under construction. There is a lot of moving pieces in this division. It was once the most premier division in the UFC, but I like that we're getting this fresh kind of makeover at light heavyweight where it's not the same guys all the time. There's a lot of fish in the sea here, and I'm interested to see who gets matched up, but a lot of that questions can't be answered till after June when Glover fights Yuri Prohaska for the title.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Jamal Hill earlier this year, a month ago now, a few weeks ago against Johnny Walker. He's one of those guys on the come up. We'll talk about Khalil Roundtree, I'm sure, as a guy from Saturday that bears watching. We've seen some other people that are sort of starting to move forward. And so it's going to be interesting. We've got a fight next week in London, the Paul Craig, Nikita Krylov fight. Paul Craig's unbeaten in 5 straight and kind of putting it together and beat Jamal Hill last year. So starting to get a
win over Ankalaev.
And has a win over Ankalaev, that last second Hail Mary triangle choke. The only win over Ankalaev.
Yeah.
So it's getting interesting. And as you said, used to be the premier division. That feels like eons ago when it was the weight class that we all were so focused on in the days of Chuck and Tito and Randy. And then the group that was kind of playing hot potato with the belt before John Jones came around. But it's starting to get back there. And there's some really interesting stories. And as you said, going to be interesting to see how everything gets matched up going forward.
As we move on here, the co-main event, Spencer, in the bantamweight division. Let's be real. Bantamweight, best division in the sport, not just UFC. If you look through the lay of the land, this is the premier division, and it's just so much riches in the bantamweight division. Like when I saw this fight was announced, it's like Song Yadong and Marlon Moraes. This is an absolute banger that you didn't even think would come together, but here it is because everyone's just kind of vying for position. And Song Yadong has his best performance in the UFC, beating Marlon Moraes, a former champion outside of the UFC and World Series of Fighting, a former contender for the bantamweight title in the UFC, and he just looked fantastic. Song hits like a ton of bricks, and he gets that statement win that he needs against Marlon Moraes, who unfortunately he's lost 4 in a row. And I guess we'll start with that. Like Marlon, where does he go from here? I saw apparently he took his gloves off. I hope it's not the end of Marlon Moraes, especially since he went over to Thailand to train at Tiger Muay Thai. But he's in that tough stretch now where does he become kind of the litmus test guy, the guy to get through, or where do we go here with Marlon Moraes?
I've been thinking about this a lot this morning since you sort of mentioned it in the teaser tweet for everybody. Yeah. To jump into this stream of where does he go, and got thinking about it. And to me, it's sort of, he's in that spot where he needs to kind of amalgamate the Andrei Arlovsky and Jim Miller of things. So Andrei Arlovsky really changed his style, went from being the guy that was happy to get into boxing matches and really take your shot to land my shot when he figured out I can't take your shot anymore. And so he's a lot more economical with his striking. He's moved to do a lot more wrestling and clinch work and kind of keep his chin tucked and beat you on points. He's not looking to knock you out anymore. Jim Miller, a couple years ago, figured out I'm no longer in this top 10, top 15 mix, but I still want to compete. I still want to be out here. I still enjoy this, and said, so just give me whoever. I mean, that's always been Jim Miller. It's why he has his nickname that I won't swear on your show, but it's why he is Jim F. and Miller. But he also said, he's never a guy that said no. And when it's the young guys on the come up or another veteran that isn't in the mix, but it's just a good opportunity to compete, he jumps at it because he still wants to compete. I think Marlon Moraes is at a point where he needs to kind of look at both of those guys and adopt that approach, because I don't think he's done. I don't think Marlon Moraes is never going to win another fight. But I don't think he's going to be the top 15 guy anymore, given his style, given what we've seen. And so if he can kind of dial it back and accept some of these fights a little outside of the rankings and against some of these up-and-coming guys or other bantamweights in that same position, that might be a way for him to start having a little bit of success to maybe build some momentum to get back, because it's just not working. We've seen now in 4 straight fights, he just can't take those shots anymore. The first shot Song Yadong threw that landed clean kind of wobbled him, and he had to take the stagger back and reset. Part of that is Song Yadong, as you said, hits like a ton of bricks, but it's also that Marlon just can't take those shots anymore. And so if he can figure out a spot and accept a little bit of his own mortality, I think there's room for him to still be a member of this roster and still be a useful and important piece of the bantamweight ecosystem. But it takes some real humility to get there.
Yeah, we'll see if Marlon Moraes does make some adjustments to his game plan. But when you look at Marlon Moraes here, obviously he's now on a 4-fight losing streak. Granted, he's losing to the elite of the elite at bantamweight. Obviously, Corey Sandhagen, that insane wheel kick, Rob Font, Rob Dvalishvili, and now Song Yadong. But you also wonder if that Jose Aldo fight, maybe got in his head a little bit that, he won the fight, but a lot of people, the public, felt he didn't win that fight, thought Aldo did enough to win that fight. And, in reality, maybe he could have been on a 5-fight losing or even a 6-fight losing streak, because the Cejudo fight was before that Aldo fight. So will be interesting to see if Moraes does make the adjustments. I think he's too talented to just let go free agency purposes. And the UFC is kind of in that spot where they just want to keep some guys around. They're happy to cut some guys from those bigger contracts, but at bantamweight, you need someone like a Marlon Moraes still in that division. But the guy that beat him here, Song Yadong, I mean, this is a prospect that I think is advancing from that level term prospect. Now, a 3-fight win streak, 2 of those 3 wins have come by finish, and he's really he's the UFC's dream come true. Another contender in a top division and representing that Chinese flag very proud. Like, he's just a PR dream for the UFC. And not only that, he can fight. Like, he can fight with some of the best of the best.
Yeah, it's really impressive to me what he's done, and surprising to me. I know I tweeted it out yesterday after the performance and got a little bit up on my soapbox about it. 24 years old, 8-1-1 in the UFC now, and a guy that we don't talk about enough. And I hope that this performance is the one that gets us really talking about him and really paying attention to him, because this is a brilliant performance in a chain of very good performances. Like, even the loss last year to Kyler Phillips, got out hustled early, but was coming back on. And we've seen what Kyler Phillips is as well. And so just a guy that, as you said, complete package. He's working with a team at Alpha Male that has a proven history of building guys, especially in these later divisions, especially at bantamweight, into contenders and even champions. And so he's got a bunch of experience despite being 24. He's now 10 fights into his UFC career, which is incredible. He's won 8 of those, which is tremendous. He's knocking out former title challengers. This is a guy, to me, that we should see a lot from. I would like to see him get a main event opportunity next time out. I think that's sort of where he's at. If we can find somebody a little bit ahead of him in the rankings, Jose Aldo, somebody in that range, maybe Pedro Munoz, I'd be up for seeing that. And just to see a little bit. There's no need to rush him along because, as you've said, bantamweight is so stacked right now, but he's absolutely a guy for me that's at the top of the list of young guys working their way forward in this division that we have to keep close tabs on, because he looks like he's going to be a championship contender for years to come.
One of the guys Song Yadong wanted to fight at the post-fight press conference, he said, was he wants to take that alpha male Dominic Cruz rivalry to the next millennium. And I'm down with it. You know what? Like, Cruz is a different cat, especially from the technical aspects, and there's a lot to be out there. But I could see the UFC putting that fight together, alone with the history of the guy that's in Song's corner in Uriah Faber and their history. And as well, I think we're still waiting for Cruz to get a fight. Why not maybe give Song Yadong an opportunity? Or now with, the world kind of opening up, as you said there, Spencer, getting him a main event, maybe in China or somewhere out in Asia, I think would be a huge launching pad for this is, the real time to focus on Song Yadong, getting a main event outside of North America.
I tweeted about that Dominic Cruz call out and said something along the lines of an alpha male guy calling out Dominic Cruz, what is this, 2012? And it is the most successful tweet of my lifetime. Over 700 likes. So it just goes to show you what people on Twitter enjoy is just jokes and hilarity. I don't want to see it. Dominic Cruz is, as you said, at a very different place in his career. And so I don't want that violence for Dominic Cruz, even though I think he could win because Dom is still a crafty and savvy dude in there. I don't need to see that fight. I still want the Dominic Cruz, Jose Aldo, WEC Never Die fight that we've all been wanting for years and years and years. Like, let's just make that happen and let the two older guys, two experienced guys battle it out and find someone else for Song Yadong. I do know that the UFC had been talking about and might still be considering a fight in Shanghai, I think, this year. And so that's the only other option to me in terms of Song Yadong. If it is a pay-per-view, which I believe it's expected to be or anticipated to be, get him on that show as a homegrown product that can be over there and be one of the local big stars for it. We see how effective that is in so many different events. If not that, get him 5 rounds. Let him start building that experience. Let him start seeing where he fits and his ability to go that, because that's been one of the little knocks, one of the little hangups for him is he can get tired. And so get him in there with another tough competitor, keep this division moving forward, keep him potentially moving forward. And let's just see what we got, because he looked like $1 million on Saturday.
He did look like $1 million. We'll have to definitely keep our eyes on Song Yadong, and just another great prospect coming out of Team Alpha Male, which that gym just keeps racking out quality talent year after year, decade after decade, and the hits don't keep on. The hits keep on coming as we move to Sadiq Youssef, Alec Caceres, Bruce Lee Roy at featherweight. Spencer, this was an interesting one. Obviously, we hadn't seen Sadiq Youssef in over a year, and Bruce Lee Roy on my live stream preview, I said this guy's a late bloomer. It's taken him a while to kind of find the form that he's in now, but this is the best Bruce Lee Roy we've seen. It didn't go his way. He couldn't find a way to get the fight to the ground. And Sadiq Youssef is just such a massive hulking figure at 145 pounds. But Sadiq Youssef gets back in the win column. And more importantly, that's a face and name that I like to see get back in the win column and back in the UFC.
Yeah, definitely a guy that I think people forgot about a little because of the year off. And he talked about it with Zach Packleb from UFC.com, that it was a lot of major health issues. And he wasn't necessarily thinking about, I need to get back to fighting. It was, I need to make sure I'm healthy enough to live life the way I want to live life. So he really struggled after getting COVID and having long hauler symptoms. So it is terrific to see him back out there. I think a lot of people, when he lost that fight to Arnold Allen last year, kind of just abandoned the bandwagon because there was expectations that Sadiq was going to go out there, get that victory, and keep pushing forward. He was undefeated in the UFC prior to that. I think a lot of people underrated the Almighty, who fights next week against Dan Hooker in just a phenomenal matchup. And it kind of took some of the shine off Sadiq, and then he's out for a year and people kind of forget about him a little bit. But to me, he's an absolute legitimate top 15 featherweight. We're going to see big things from him going forward. It's great, as you said, to see him get back in the cage and get back in the win column with the kind of performance that he had on Saturday night. You mentioned Alex Caceres, though. My wife came in, and my wife used to watch The Ultimate Fighter with me back when, much like everybody else, we used to watch The Ultimate Fighter every week that it was on, and we don't now. And she saw Bruce Lee Roy on the screen and was like, whoa, that dude's still fighting? Like, he's still around? And I was like, right? Like 12 years ago, he's on The Ultimate Fighter. And now here he is as a 33-year-old, as you said, in the best form of his career. I thought that fight, even though the results didn't go his way, kind of legitimized everything that he's been doing. It made this progression and it made this development real to me. Before this, it was kind of like, is he just beating not great competition and guys that don't necessarily know how to deal with him? And I think even though he lost that fight, we saw a lot of good things from him. We saw tangible, legitimate improvements in his striking. We see the poise now and the understanding of how to deploy his skills a lot more than we did in his younger years. And I think he's going to be a guy that just hangs out outside of that top 15, being a real pain in the backside for anybody trying to make their way up the divisional ladder at his expense.
So someone that everyone in the UFC needs to talk to, being in the UFC for 12 years, like that's an accomplishment in its own right, to still find your way on the best roster in all of mixed martial arts. And as we said, really putting it together and becoming the Bruce Lee Roy I think we thought we were going to get right after The Ultimate Fighter. What was that, season 12, season 13?
12, George St. Pierre and Josh Koscheck. won by Jonathan Brookins.
Yeah, and Michael Johnson on that season.
And Michael Johnson, the menace on that one.
So, like, that's the Bruce Leroy I think we thought we were getting straight out of Tough. He was going to be the breakthrough guy. He had a personality, came out in the Bruce Lee style gi with the afro pick with the afro. And, he got humbled a little bit. And sometimes in life, you need to be humbled. And now he's just, focusing on what he needs to do inside the cage. And as you said there, Spencer, Sadiq Youssef being back is a win for the UFC and for the featherweight division, because that division as well is starting to build up some steam and be in the form that it once was. And then as we transition here to, I think one of the best moments on the card here, light heavyweight division, Khalil Roundtree, Carl Roberson. Like, first of all, we knew this fight was going to just be an absolute banger, and it delivered in that aspect. Khalil Roundtree, one of the most violent men I think we've ever seen step inside the octagon, and one of the smartest guys, because he's actually someone that throws those leg kicks to grounded opponent, or those leg shots to like the body when they're grounded, perfectly legal, and that's what helped set up the victory here against Carl Roberson. But the biggest story coming out of this is the amazing, passionate speech that Khalil Roundtree gave to Paul Felder after pretty much speaking on mental health and, that, you can go forward. And if, you're like him, who's 400 pounds, like your life matters. And I just thought it was just a very impassionate speech and kind of sets Roundtree, apart from some of the guys in the status he's in at light heavyweight right now. And you're just interested and intrigued to see Khalil Roundtree next time out.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the performance in the cage, and you mentioned the violence and those kicks. It reminds you of how dangerous and how violent this dude can be. When he was on the come up, he was a guy that a lot of prospect watchers, when he was fighting in RFA, before RFA merged with LFC and they became LFA, he was a guy that a lot of people were watching like, this is a violent dude that's coming up. He had been at the Juan fight team for a while in Vegas and things like that. He got onto Tough. And there were some holes, and we saw some of the holes and some of the struggles, but there were always those little flashes of violent potential. The Gokansaki knockout is the one that I think a lot of people remember, the Eric Anders beating after he had gone over to Thailand and really committed himself to Muay Thai. We are seeing now in these last couple fights, when Khalil focuses in and is able to be his most violent self in the cage, it is very, very scary. And he is a guy that we have to be aware of going forward. I think he has gotten to a place in life where he is again settled back home in Las Vegas, good team around him, good people around him, and we're going to see the best of him going forward. In terms of the post-fight stuff, both in the cage and I know at his media session afterwards talking about it, I feel very fortunate to have built a little bit of a relationship with Khalil Roundtree through interviewing him and talking to him a number of times over his UFC career. He is one of the most thoughtful, articulate, compassionate people I've ever spoken to in this sport, in doing what I do. And what we saw on Saturday is 100% genuine, earnest, who he is, what he wants to be. And to me, as somebody who has made no bones about my own mental health struggles and challenges, anytime somebody is willing to put themselves out there like that and stand up and say, I've done this, I've been where you are, I've struggled with what you're struggling with, I am here for you, you matter, I'm all in. I'm 100% all in. I was all in with Khalil Roundtree before this, just from enjoying his fights. And as I said, having a little bit of a relationship with him from doing some stories with him over the past. But this is just, everybody now gets to be on board, and everybody should be on board, because he is legitimately a great dude and a super exciting fighter to watch. And I hope this gets to be his moment going forward, where he gets some of these opportunities to do the things that he wants to do with this, because this isn't necessarily just about, I want to bring attention to me and I want spotlight. It is about doing good things for other people going forward. And if that's, to me, that's what we all need to do with our platforms, with our brands, whatever it may be, is empower others and help others. And he wants to do that. So my hat is always going to be off to Khalil Roundtree.
And you pretty much hit the nail on the head there, Spencer. The thing about it is it's genuine. It's not someone pretending to be someone or saying anything about mental health because it's kind of the hot topic, the great thing to get some like he was genuinely, you could tell, speaking from the heart and from personal experiences. And if you're the UFC, you need to clip that off and just show that at any, conference or anything you have with fighters or speaking engagements, because that was one of the best and most compassionate speeches that we've ever seen anyone really have inside the Octagon. And for Khalil Roundtree, I couldn't happen to, as you said, a better guy. And I think that now advances him to another tier in this light heavyweight division, not only from the speaking engagement, but from the performance. Like, that was a performance you want to see from a Khalil Roundtree. That's what we expect from a Khalil Roundtree, who was on The Ultimate Fighter, on 2 go-arounds of that show. And now, comes back and dealt with his mental health issues. And you know what, as well, being very open about that, as a lot of guys still aren't, especially in mixed martial arts, like the toughest sport of them all. Not a lot of people are willing to talk about their mental health issues. And I give credit to anyone in this sport that wants to be open and raw with not only themselves, but to the viewing public. Like, that had to be a big step for Khalil Roundtree. Like, he just, as soon as the mic came, it went right into that. And so I tip my hat once again to Khalil Roundtree.
Yeah, if people get a chance, jump on Twitter, jump on the internet, and find his post-fight scrum. Alex Bahunin asked a question of him of if you could speak to the Khalil that's sitting at home right now on his couch, feeling like you felt, what would you tell them? And he gave like a 2-minute answer where he was fighting tears the whole way through and clearing his eyes the whole way through. That is who this dude is. It's who he's always been. He's now gotten to a point, as we've said, where he is comfortable and determined to address it and speak to it in public and help others and use his platform and his ability to continue dealing with it and make progress to help others. And that's a beautiful thing, man. And then we have Khalil the fighter, who is just absolute, like, those kicks to the body. I mean, it might be my favorite strike of the year in the UFC. Just that one kick right to the ribs, because you know how terrible it feels, but it's so violent and vicious. And as much as, I don't wish broken bones on anyone, I don't wish violence upon anyone, but God, it was fun to watch and reminded you of what this dude can be in the cage when he is focused and just on it. And he has been on it these last 2 fights. I know a lot of people had some qualms about the end of his fight with Modestas Bukauskas with that oblique kick that jacked up his leg, but he's a violent dude and he's looked like a bad man these last 2 fights, and I can't wait to see what comes next for him.
Also, lastly, on the performance for Khalil Roundtree, to put on that kind of kicking display against Carl Roberson, who was a former kickboxer in glory, definitely let Carl Roberson once again know about the difference in MMA and kickboxing, where kickboxing would have been down and got the standing 10 or whatever, and then here's Khalil coming in with the violent performance, those leg kicks to the right to the ribs and to the solar plexus that pretty much end the fight. And once again, we both, Spencer, can't say enough good things about Khalil Roundtree and his performance. And then as you move down, once again, the lightweight division, Drew Dober, Terence McKinney, like, this fight was insane. An early round of the year contender for me. Terence McKinney took this fight on 2 weeks' notice, continuing to build his brand and his name. And he almost got himself like his 4th or 5th finish in under 30 seconds, came right in, blitzed Dober with a knee right up the gut. Dober was in a world of trouble, and McKinney just couldn't get, the tough Drew Dober finished. And the one thing I thought going to this fight is, while McKinney's fought some good guys and, a 7-second win over Matt Frivola in your debut, that's fantastic. And the arm triangle finish just a few weeks ago, Drew Dober's a different level of guy, and he's been in there with some of the elite guys at 155 pounds, and it showed there because he weathered the storm, and he was able to turn the fight and get a first-round finish here against Terence McKinney. And for Dober, that's a huge win, kind of needed to have one of those. And for McKinney, even though he lost, I still can't wait to see what we see next from him, especially from learning from that experience.
Yeah, I think that last piece is the reason I loved this fight so much for Terence McKinney, right? It's a no-lose proposition. If he goes out and loses to Drew Dober on 2 weeks turnaround, we all understand that Drew Dober is just a different level, as you said. He's a cut above where Terence McKinney is at right now. to go out there and have a performance like that, even though he loses, even though he gets stopped in the first round. We all had that first 90 seconds where it was going to be that Terence McKinney was all of a sudden a top 15 guy in 3 fights in the span of about 2 weeks now, especially these last 2 fights. And so for me, it becomes just a giant learning opportunity. The thing that he's missing right now, and I talked about it a little bit in putting out my podcast this morning, the Next Day Takeaways, is if he can dial back some of that aggression, just 10, 15%. I thought of the Trevor Whitman, Justin Gaethje in the fight with Tony Ferguson, right? Just pull it back 10% and you'll get this guy out of here. He was a little bit rushed. He was a little bit hurried. It's still just that inexperience, right? Of understanding I've got this guy hurt and it's going to take a little bit for him to clear those cobwebs because I do have a lot of power and I did have him on skates. So let me just settle in here because we saw a lot of spinning attacks. We saw a lot of wide hooks. We saw a lot of rushed kind of hustle to get this guy out of here. And that turns into, I didn't get him out of here. And now Drew Dober's tough as nails and coming back against me. And I don't have the energy or the wherewithal to deal with this. It's going to be a tremendous learning opportunity and growth opportunity for Terence McKinney. And then on the other side of it, it's, as you said, a reminder that Drew Dober is one of the best lightweights in the world, even if he's not ranked. He entered last year at number 15, got a couple losses to top 15 guys, including the man I think is the best lightweight on the world, Islam Makhachev. It shows you that there are, to quote Frankie Edgar, levels to this. It's why we need guys like Drew Dober. It's why we need to celebrate them. As you said earlier with somebody who I can't remember right now, we need to celebrate these kinds of fighters and appreciate these kinds of fighters that are maybe not ranked, maybe not going to be title contenders. But I'll be damned if Drew Dober isn't a dog that can go out there and have fights like that and do that 3-4 times a year against whoever. And so a great performance for him that reminds everybody that he's a top 15, top 20 guy in that division, but still a good learning opportunity for Terence McKinney to grow from going forward.
Also learning experience for Terence McKinney. Maybe don't take the fight on that short notice. I understand, like, you want to keep getting your name out there in the brand, but got to understand, like, Drew Dober is not someone you just 2 weeks and I'm good.
Right.
Like, Drew Dober, as you said, Spencer, like, he hung his own against Islam Makhachev last year. And then, of course, he lost a tough fight Dober did to Brad Riddell. But, like, Brad Riddell is also tough. And
right.
Drew Dober's been in this game since, like, 2009. So he's been up and through the valleys with this, training at Elevation Fight Team in Colorado, which I think is one of the best gyms in all of the sport. As you said, for McKinney, it's going to be a learning experience. I can't wait to see what we see from him next. I hope he keeps some of the gimmicks of, like, tweeting before he comes out. Like, he's very relatable to an audience. But he just, got himself in a scenario where you can't just finish these guys in 30 seconds that are someone of the level of Drew Dober. You've had that success, but that, lightning only strikes so many times. And for Drew Dober, I would hate to beat anyone in 155. I would see that guy next because he's hungry. He's now got himself a win. And, he derails the hype train here a little bit for Terence McKinney. And Drew Dober, a beautiful man with a beautiful performance last night.
Yeah, it's he's sort of one of those guys that I think there are some people that are absolutely going to have the reaction that you just said of, oh, really? I got to fight Drew Dober? But I think there are also a lot of people that go, all right, I get to fight Drew Dober because what you're going to get. He is going to be in shape, phenomenal shape at that, super conditioned. He's good everywhere. He's tough as nails. And you go out, if you beat him, again, as we sort of talked about throughout and as we talk about after most cards, right? The quality of this man. What it takes to beat him. And so that's what makes this fight appealing for Terence McKinney and for anyone else going forward. He now is, again, reset where he's at in that division, reminded everybody of where he stands in that division. And so if you're the next guy on the come up that just watched that fight and is looking for a name to call out, I'm sure in the next 2 weeks of cards or the next three events, somebody will call out Drew Dober based on that performance, and we'll all be excited about it because we're reminded of who Drew Dober is, and that person will be coming off a good win, and it'll make sense. So it's a great opportunity. But yeah, there's definitely going to be some people that Sean Shelby is going to reach out and be like, what about Drew Dober in June? and they're going to think, I was planning a vacation in June.
Yeah, they'll stick with their vacation plans when you see Drew Dober on the bout sheet coming towards you. But, when we're talking about this card, where the key to this card really was prospects and guys in the next, step, or who are going to be players in their respective divisions and the next fight, Alex Perriera, Bruno Silva. I think we have our guy that I can't wait to see get an opportunity. I still think he needs a couple more fights in the UFC, but he just feels like that fresh face. It's Alex Perriera. He's putting it together, coming from that world of kickboxing. He's shown, if he gets taken down, he can find his way back up, and just some insane level striking that you couldn't pay me enough money to take one of those leg kicks or shots to the body to receive. And give credit to Bruno Silva. He said he wanted to kind of stand in the pocket and trying to trade shots with Perriera. And I thought Silva won the first round on my scorecard. I thought he did enough, hung his own, but it's just that level of striking was just too much of a difference maker for Perriera to win on the scorecards. And I keep getting excited every time I see Pereira's name coming up on a future UFC card, because this is a guy I feel maybe not this year, but by some point, maybe 2023, he gets that rematch with the current champion, Israel Adesanya, but this time in MMA.
So I'm weirdly on the other side of this. It's not that I don't want to see Alex Perriera continue to fight. I'm very much interested. I'm all about answer questions. Every event, every fight is I have questions about this person or that person, and I want to see them answered. But with him, I'm at this, I want to see I want to actually see the questions answered, and I still have a bunch of questions. This to me was a very favorable matchup against the guy in Bruno Silva that is largely going to stand and trade with him, who doesn't have wrestling in his back pocket, who doesn't have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in his back pocket, or that he uses. Entered into this fight 0 submission wins, so you knew what you were going to get. Alex Perriera looked good, don't get me wrong. I think he is a super intriguing guy in this division because he's gigantic and he has phenomenal striking, as you said, being a former 2-weight world champion in glory. But I still need to see a bunch of it. I need to see the progression up the ladder. I need to see him against some of these top 15 guys, top 10 guys, because for me right now, I look at anybody that can wrestle and can put this guy on the canvas and keep him there. I think they run through him, because as much as he was able to sprawl well against Bruno Silva and get himself back up against Bruno Silva isn't Jack Hermanson, isn't, maybe Kelvin Gastelum isn't going to be able to do it because it's a huge size discrepancy and Calvin's a little bit shop worn at this point. But I want to see the progression before I hear it. For me going in, Alex Perriera talking about Israel Adesanya, I understood it. Slow down, big fella. Go out and get some wins. Izzy right now, I think right now if they fought, Izzy would take him down and submit him. And so let me see that you can go out there and beat some of these guys further up the food chain. If you get there organically by winning fights, I'm all in. I will be as hyped as anybody. And I'll be the first person to jump out and say, I was wrong and should have been on board the Alex Perriera train a lot earlier. But right now for me, it's keep proving some things to me in matchups that aren't designed to make you look good.
Well, we'll see where the UFC goes with him, because you can tell the UFC kind of buys into the Alex Perriera train. But you are right. If you want to fight, especially Israel Adesanya, who's arguably the second best mixed martial artist in the world right now, and has shown a complete evolution in his game, especially with the ground game going on. You need to fight someone if you look at the top 15 rankings, I think maybe an Edmund Shabazian, that's an interesting matchup there, as he's got the 15th in the division right now. I could see that being something, but the progression continues to be for Alex Perriera. And he's training with a great team there, in Danbury, Connecticut, with the current light heavyweight champion in Glover Teixeira. So he can only get better from here.
Right. 100%. And that's the thing, right? You mentioned Edmund Shabazian. My buddy from the Severe Show, Harry Powell, mentioned that name to me as well in DMs as we were talking about it. And I just said, why do you want to get it? What did Edmund Shabazian do to you? Why do you want to get this man killed? Because I think he will get killed in a fight like that. Because as much as Edmund does have some wrestling, he also has some holes in his striking game. And Alex Perriera, as I said, is gigantic and would pick him apart at range coming in. And I think it would get ugly. the ones I'm looking at. I really like, if we want to see what this guy is capable of where this guy's at, give me a fight with Jack Hermanson. Give me 3 rounds against Jack Hermanson and prove to me that you can defend those takedowns that the Joker's going to be getting in on, and that you can go 15 minutes with somebody of that caliber. You beat Jack Hermanson, cool. I'm in. I'm on board. Give you whoever you want. Give you Izzy, because middleweight's a bit of a wasteland in terms of contenders and possible title challengers. Give me something like that. He's 34 years old already. That's the other piece of this, right? He's been around for a long time. He had a lot of kickboxing fights. He may be new to MMA, but he's not new to combat sports. So let's maximize the window. Let's get him in there and see where he stands, because if he wins, we're still moving forward. We're just, the hype is getting bigger. The momentum's getting bigger. And if he loses, we do the reset, we figure it out, and then we move forward.
Well, he's one of those guys. I think 2022 is going to be a very pivotal year for him because, as you said, middleweight's kind of a wasteland. We're kind of trying to get some new faces in there. And he's definitely one of them and exciting, but you don't also want to rush the progression where it kind of hurts a fighter down the line. There was Julius Nkalikas in Bellator last night. I feel like Bellator's kind of just skyrocketed him, and he's now lost 2 in a row, and you can kind of see his confidence breaking a little bit. And you don't want to have that with someone like Perriera. Now, granted, Pereira's maybe got a little bit more combat sport experience, as you said, with being a champion in Glory Kickboxing, but he's someone we definitely need to keep our eyes on in 2022. And of course, if Adesanya keeps on the roll, that matchup is always still there. You don't have to rush to it right now with Perriera and Israel Adesanya. The prelim, Spencer, they finished with an exciting fight. And I know you spoke with AJ Fletcher for a nice piece you put up on the UFC website against Matt Semmelsberger. And this fight delivered and then some. It was just 2 welterweights that hit like Mack trucks getting in there, but a fight that was more on the ground side of things. And I thought Semmelsberger showed he's evolving as a mixed martial artist. He can hit you, get you out of there in under 30 seconds. But he held his own on the ground against, the debuting AJ Fletcher, who was coming off that highlight reel flying knee KO to kick off last season of the Contender Series.
Yeah, Semi's a guy that is a former collegiate football player, D1 safety at Marist College, had NFL aspirations. As soon as he figured out that wasn't going to work, he had already been training MMA and had an amateur fight and things like that. I think he had his first pro fight even before he went to college, and just said, you know what? I'm going to go this MMA route. Left school. I'm out. Just told his parents, I'm not even finishing school. Football's done. I'm done. I'm going to start fighting. And is still in that process of transitioning from being a standout athlete that fights to being a mixed martial artist. And I think we saw a little bit of that development and that growth on Saturday. The high amplitude takedown of AJ Fletcher in that 3rd round to really kind of put himself in a position to salt it away, busted him up with some elbows on the ground. I still think AJ Fletcher has a ton of potential. This is his first fight. It's a big step up. He's going from fighting guys from winning on the Contender Series and fighting guys on sort of the AA regional circuit to fighting a guy that's already 3-1 in the UFC. That's a big bump up. We saw some of the potential. We saw some of the upside in that fight with the wrestling skills. We've seen the highlight reel finishes on the regional circuit. He's surrounded by good people with Tim Crater. Obviously, Dustin Poirier in his corner last night was training with Alan Jobin as well. And so still has a bright future. This was maybe just a little bit too much of a step up for his debut, but definitely a guy to still watch for. And Semi now being 4-1 in the UFC. The losses to Chaos Williams, who's sort of a fringe top 15, top 25 guy in that division. So a guy also to keep an eye on and keep watch for going forward. Because as you said, 2 sub 16 second knockouts last year. So the lightning power is there, but we're starting to see more of the full game as well.
And you can just see, as you said, he's evolving from that athlete as happens in MMA, 2 guys with striking backgrounds. The striking cancels each other out. The wrestling is going to be in play. And you can just see, Semmelsberger's, experience from going through the regional season. And he's fought in some good promotions like a CFFC or an Art of War. So he's fought in some good regional promotions, whereas you said Fletcher, while a guy that's got good people in his corner and I think is going to be something at 170 pounds, it just wasn't maybe the matchup that for him that night. But I liked the matchup from the UFC where we don't normally get these, guys that are kind of on that, their rockets ready to launch for both of them, meaning early in their careers in the UFC. I really liked the matchup. Fletcher's going to only get better from a performance like that. And Semelsberger, that's someone I think we need to keep our eye on at 170 pounds because new hairdo and all, this guy can really compete with anyone right now as you're trying to make to that top 15 in the UFC.
Yeah, Grillo de Shag is probably going to need to throw braids in it next time out so he's not, brushing it out of his face every 13 seconds. But a guy that is kind of similar to Alex Perriera in the size for the division, right? He's 6'1", massive reach as he continues to learn how to use that reach and use all of these things that he brings to the cage, all of these different. I remember talking to him before the fight with Martin Santo Jr. He said, I had all the ingredients on the table. I just didn't mix them all in well enough. He's still figuring that part out, right? He's still relatively young and relatively early in his career. And a bunch of his early fights went pretty quickly, whether they were wins or losses. So he hasn't accumulated that cage time and that live experience that we know from covering the sport and talking to these athletes is the biggest thing in terms of helping you grow as an athlete. You can do all you want in the gym. There is no substitute for live action. And he's now got another 15 minutes in there. Those 16 and 15-second wins are fantastic. Get in, get paid. Nobody's paid by the hour. Get out of there. Take no damage. Great night. But it's fights like this that help you take those big leaps and bounds forward in terms of your development. And he's somebody that I think he's 29 years old, good size for the division, good athlete. We're seeing that is, as you said, a guy that put a little asterisk next to him. Remember to tune in next time he's out because it might be a 15-second knockout, but it may also be a guy that we see developing and kind of slowly growing his way up the ladder in this division.
Yeah, Semelsberger's frame is kind of outstanding for 170 pounds. A guy that's an amateur fought at light heavyweight and then made the transition as pro to middleweight and now found his perfect weight class here at welterweight. And I can't wait to see both him and Fletcher continue their ventures here in the welterweight division of the UFC. JJ Aldrich had a real nice performance against Jillian Robertson. Tough for Jillian taking a fight with someone that's that good. As good of a grappler Jillian is, if you don't have a real time frame camp to get ready for a JJ Aldrich, she's gonna make your life tough, and that's exactly what she did. Is Aldrich now winner of 3 in a row, and one of those girls that's just putting herself in that spot to be a true contender at 125 pounds. There was another girl on this card, Miranda Maverick, who I maybe they make that fight, I don't know, but there's some real good contenders at women's 125.
Yeah, flyweight is fantastic. It is such an interesting group in terms of the different pockets of fighters to me. There's that young group that includes Miranda Maverick and Erin Blanchfield and Casey O'Neill and still Macy Barber and Maria Agapova and a bunch of young fighters that are working their way forward. And I don't include Sabina Mazo, who is still actually only 24, but feels like she's older than that group because we've known her since the LFA days, since she came up to the UFC, I think at 21. And then there's that JJ Aldrich group that are experienced, but still not as experienced or as seasoned as that group of Jennifer Maya and Caitlin Chukagian and Cynthia Calvillo and Joanne Wood. And then there's Valentina, who just, is Valentina and is just a whole nother level and a whole nother. We don't need to talk about her with any of these people yet because they're not there. But this was a great performance for JJ Aldrich, who is just another one of those ultra professional. You know what you're going to get. She is, to me, similar to Drew Dober. You know what you're going to get when you're in there with her. She is fundamentals. She is a good jab. And if you can't put her on the ground, you're in for a long night. And we saw that with Jillian Robertson, who I think is a talented fighter and still has ways to be a factor in this division. But like a lot of jiu-jitsu players or a lot of people that's their primary weapon, she really needs to figure out either working that jab and that ability to get inside or just sell out on wrestling. Like you need to figure out ways to get these fights. We saw it in the second round where she finally got a hold of JJ Aldridge and just dragged her to the ground, right? Get that back waist lock and just sit down into it and pull her down with you. She needs to find more ways to make that happen consistently, or else she's going to get stuck in fights like this where she's getting pieced up on the feet by people that are just sticking to 1-2s and sticking to good movement and sticking to range. And so another fight, kind of like we were talking about with Terence McKinney and Drew Dober, right? Great performance from the veteran, learning opportunity from the younger fighter. Let's see what happens going forward.
I got to say also for JJ Aldrich, you could hear her corner, her Elliot Fire Marshall, literally screaming the instructions and pretty much just like a blueprint of go from step 1 to step 2 to 3 on how to, advance positions in that fight. And, JJ Aldrich's another one of those fighters training at Elevation in Colorado, which is, as I said, one of the best gyms. Just look at the talent coming out of that gym. And JJ Aldrich is one of those. And I think the thing with JJ Aldrich is, she's going to try to get the fight to the ground. And the matter of fact, if you can't stop the takedown, you can try to stop the takedown, but you'll find a way to get it to the ground and make it a long night for you, as it was, unfortunately, for Jillian Robertson, as JJ Aldrich now moves to 11-4, a 3-fight win streak, and is, on the bubble of, really advancing her career right now at a women's flyweight, as, we'll talk about Miranda Maverick later on, but that's someone I'm really keen on, Spencer, in this division. I think, if Valentina goes away, I think Miranda Maverick could be a champion in that division. There's like a 1, and then there's just like everyone else below Shevchenko, but I think Maverick is someone that special. But Javid Basharat beat Trevin Jones. Great performance from Basharat in his UFC debut after a great performance on the Contender Series to earn a contract. I thought he did use his mic time very well, try to get his brother into the UFC, who was also fighting around the world on that night. But, to pretty much, get the better of a good striker in Trevin Jones shows just how talented Basharat is. Only flaw, unfortunately, he couldn't come out with the Afghani flag. I don't know what that's about, but he needs to come out with that, because that's a great story in its own right from where, the region he's, representing with his choice of geography. But Basharat, another real good prospect at bantamweight too. So the waters are deep at 135.
Yeah, he's another one of those Contender Series grads from last year that I sort of went into this fight or approached this fight a little hesitant about, because the quality of competition to get here hasn't been great. And I'll be the first to admit, you can only beat the guys that they put across from you. He has beaten all of the guys that they put across from him. Had it on good account from my guys at Severe Harry and Sean Denny that he is legit. He is the real deal. His grappling is actually the stronger suit. So as good as he looked on Saturday, standing with a striker and getting the better of a striker in Trevin Jones, apparently the grappling is even better. So I am now fully on board and fully interested in seeing where this goes. Trains with Amir Albazi, who's an ascending flyweight, and his brother, as you mentioned, Farid Basharat, who got a win as well to remain undefeated. I would like to see him get the opportunity, because seeing brothers compete in the UFC is always fun. It allows me to christen them the Fighting insert last name brothers, which is great, like the Fighting Dacus brothers currently. But a great performance, and as you said, just another bantamweight. It's a cacophony of riches for us at bantamweight. I really liked his. I don't necessarily like his call out in terms of matching him with Guido Canetti, but I like the idea of, I don't need to rush this. Bantamweight is what it is right now. It's loaded. There's no need to be like, you know what, I want to jump in against Song Yadong, who's fighting. And he even acknowledged it, right? Song Yadong's fighting later tonight. I don't think that's right for me. That's too far. I'm not going to say something ridiculous, but maybe somebody else in this range. I think there are some people, you and I, obviously both Canadians. I like the idea of a fight with Chad Anheliger, a guy that is experienced, but in that same position of one fight into his UFC career, coming off a 3rd round finish. It gives you that little bit of step up in competition in terms of a guy that has been through all the steps of this, isn't going to be flustered by anything. We saw that in Chad's fight. We've seen that throughout his career, that he's on this nice winning streak where every fight has been, I have to keep winning if I want to get to where I want to get to. And so pair up these Contender Series grads, see what happens, and then move forward from there.
At least Basharat, though, used the microphone to at least try to set something up instead of whoever. Like, he realized the value of his microphone time and, wants to fight someone that also won on this card earlier in the night. So I respect him at least having a name in mind. Sure. And then as we move down here, Damon Jackson, Kamuela Kirk. Like, Damon Jackson, this second UFC run has just been fantastic for him. Had his struggles in that first UFC run, bounced around to LFA and had an unfortunate go in the PFL, losing in 10 seconds to Magomed Ankalev. And, that was a very, a defeat that affected him really mentally. Like, he had to delete social media because people were coming at him. He's now back on social media, which is great to see. But he's now really, taking his game to another level. And he just looked fantastic against the tough, hard-hitting Hawaiian in Kamuela Kirk. And for Damon Jackson, he stops the win streak that Kirk was on. And as we were just saying here, like, that's now 2 wins in a row for Jackson and getting a finish. Only complaint, I guess, about the performance from Jackson, I don't know what that back tattoo is all about. Hopefully it's a work in progress, Spencer. But nonetheless, It was a great performance from a guy that's paid his dues to get a run that he's getting on right now.
That's the part that's stuck out to me about this fight. This was a guy that has been through the battles, that has fought great if you look back at who Damon Jackson has fought and sort of where he's fought, it's either been the UFC, PFL, or LFA for pretty much the most part. So it's great competition the whole way through. He's a guy that has experienced ups and downs and figured out who he is as a fighter, what he needs to do. He's got the General Saif Saud in his corner, screaming instructions at him and giving him lectures in between rounds. I say that with all the love and respect in the world for Saif Saud, who is a phenomenal coach. And he's just figured out that I can go out there, be the best version of myself, and have a place in this division. I'm sure, his first run, as you mentioned, not a great run. He gets that knockout loss in PFL that jars the confidence again. But he's a guy that has a complete skill set, is another one of those kind of professional fighters that we keep talking about, right? He is another one of these guys that is so vital to the ecosystem. He's not going to be a contender. God bless him. I don't think he's going to win a title, but he's going to be exactly who he is, where he is in this division. And that's important. That's useful for fans, for us watching the fights, for figuring out where these guys stand. This was a litmus test for Kamuela Kirk, who looked good on short notice against Makwan Amirkhani in his debut. And we found out that he wasn't quite ready to move forward anymore. We found out that he, lightning in a bottle in that fight with Amirkhani a little bit, maybe catching Amirkhani on the way down. He comes in, good performance, away you go. But Damon Jackson is another one of those kind of gatekeeper measuring stick guys that every division needs. It's great to see him getting these opportunities. I love that he as well. He didn't have a name, but he said, look, I don't want to be messing around with these guys that are unranked and not going to get me anywhere. Like, I'm older. I want to fight top 15 guys. So let's give me somebody and have it entertain. I would love to see him fight somebody in that sort of 11 through 15 range, whoever they are right now. I don't have it up in front of me because featherweight has some guys that still, or just outside of that need those tests, that continue to need to fight and beat guys like Damon Jackson to move forward. Because if you can't, then you don't move forward.
Well, those rankings, of course, will be updated, but the number 15 spot is Bruce Lee Roy, who fought on this card. That could be a fun matchup in its own right, with the high-level grappling that both guys have, kind of force it on the feet. And we saw Damon Jackson really evolve as a striker in that first round, kind of trying to push the pace with the striking against the hard-hitting Hawaiian in Kirk, and then just realized in the second round, he can't hang with me on the ground, so I'm just going to take it there and work for that submission, and ended up getting it late in the second round. So for Jackson, he's finding his sweet spot and coming on late in his career. But you love to see those stories, guys that have had those winding roads in mixed martial arts, but now, at least for the time being, are, all straight driving ahead with no bumps in sight. So good to see for Jackson. And then, go back into the women's flyweight division. I touched on it before. Miranda Maverick in Sabino Mazo. Sabino Mazo, a talented fighter in her own right, but Miranda Maverick, Spencer, I am just so in love with her skills, her ability got it done. Second round, rear naked choke. With the exception of that Macy Barber fight where I think she won that. It was a close fight. I had her winning that fight. I think Maverick, she learned from the tough loss against Blanchfield, doesn't let it go to the judges. She gets a victory. And I really believe she's going to be a champion at some point in her UFC career. She's just too skilled all around, at a good gym. And I just think she's just got the right dynamics to be a champion in this division.
Yeah, I think the move to elevation 2 fights ago is a huge step forward for her, is a huge positive. Not that everyone needs to be at a larger gym. We've seen people succeed at smaller gyms or their own setups. But I think for someone like her that is both experienced but still pretty young, it's a great opportunity to get in there. They have a terrific cast of female fighters up there in Colorado, not just at elevation, but in Colorado, in Denver, and kind of surrounding area. And we heard them talk about it on the program last night about all the different people that she's gotten rounds in with. And to be in there and have somebody like Elliot Marshall in her corner that is step by stepping her through everything. And you can just see Miranda Maverick, who we also know is an exceptionally smart and educated individual that is about those technical and tactical and learning things, as opposed to it just being physical. But she also has the physical, which is what makes her, and I agree with you, absolutely somebody that is going to be in the mix going forward. Obviously, you come away from that fight and you get a little bit of a bump. Like that fight now, you look at Erin Blanchfield and go, oh, okay, that was really impressive what she was able to do. But she is still very much Miranda Maverick, part of that pack of young fighters, as we mentioned, that has the potential to be a group that all goes forward together and dominates this division in the next kind of 4, 5, 6 years, where I can't wait to see just the series of fights amongst that 4 or 5 pack of fighters.
Yeah, Miranda Maverick, only 24 years old, will turn 25 in July. So she's only going to get that much better. Her skills, as we said, are going to grow. But the thing I also like, she's kind of getting to a little bit of that showmanship style. Came up with the Top Gun glasses on, with the Top Gun song. So she's buying into, I guess, the complete package of what you need. You can be a great fighter in the UFC, but if you have no personality or any ability to relate to a fan base, you're going to go nowhere. It's going to be for naught. And she's kind of putting that together, though I think she needs to come out to Highway to the Danger Zone instead of just like the overall theme to Top Gun, because anytime you fight Miranda Maverick, it is a highway to the danger zone because of how talented she is. And as we said, she's one of these new breeds coming from Invicta to the UFC that are looking to wreck shop in their respective divisions. And her last opponent, Erin Blanchfield's another one of those girls, as well, as we move down here. And this is the part of the card here, Spencer, where it really just was like, oh my God, this is the greatest sport in the world for how things went on. Like, we'll start here with Cody Brundage taking on Dalcha Lugambula. And Lugambula was having his way, had it going his way on the ground, up on the feet, picking apart Cody Brundage. And then all of a sudden, Lugambula gets tired, and Brundage jumps guard, gets that guillotine, and gets the first round submission in a huge win for Cody Brundage. And it's another one of those come from behind, out of nowhere wins that we weren't expecting. But for Brundage, this is a massive win for him. Moves to 7-2 right now, and shows he can still hang with some of these guys in the UFC after that tough loss to Nick Maximov in his UFC debut.
Yeah, and he even showed in that Nick Maximov fight, like he came on in the third round and was kind of taking it to him. Took that fight on 4 days' notice. They mentioned in the lead up to his walkout and his fight on Saturday. Got some really devastating news about his daughter, he and his wife, the former Amanda Bobby Cooper, now Amanda Brundage. Got some devastating news just before that fight, and so I can't even imagine what the mindset is as you're making your debut on short notice against this hyped guy, and then you get hit with that gut punch. So to go out and still have a good performance in the third round of that fight, and then rally here on Saturday, like, it felt at 3 or 4 different times like he was 2 shots away from being done. And then Dalcha Lungiambula does as Dalcha Lungiambula does, gets exhausted and kind of it's a little bit of that panic thing, right? I don't know if necessarily I thought Cody Brundage jumped guard. A buddy of mine, Dan Urban from the Couchside Judges, said it looked a little bit too like Dolce went for a kind of a I'm tired takedown, like let's put him on the ground. Either way, Cody Brundage just locks up that arm in guillotine and gets the tap almost immediately. So you know it's either super deep or Lungiambula is just that exhausted and knows he doesn't have a way out. But either way, it's a come from behind victory that had us all talking in the moment and now talking today about this performance, which is one he needed. I think he's a guy that has the potential, as same as we've continued to talk about throughout, right? These people that have kind of gotten to the UFC maybe a little early, haven't necessarily fought through the best competition on the regional circuit, but he's at a great gym with Factory X, surrounded by very good people. If he can continue to refine these skills and build on these skills and gain from these experiences, there's potential there to be a fixture on the UFC roster.
Also got to remember for Brundage, only his third fight at middleweight was a light heavyweight. So you're kind of also getting used to your body and how your body works at this weight class, cutting the weight as well. And for Brundage, as we said, he kind of needed that win. But the guys he's fought, whether it was on the Contender Series, that's William Knight at light heavyweight. That's a bad matchup for anyone on any day of the week. And Nick Maximov, who's like this Diaz brother prodigy on the ground and showcased that in that fight that he had, which was both their UFC debuts. And, for Brundage as well, getting a finish is huge. And I'm interested to see how he progresses here at middleweight. He's obviously not going to be near a top 15, but you get a win like that against Lungiambula, who for Lungiambula, you got to figure it out. Like you got to work on some cardio or something, because you can't afford to, in a fight you're really controlling, get tired that quickly. And I know the adrenaline dump happens, but he set himself up for his own demise.
Yeah, he's a guy that throughout his UFC career, right? This is his, I think, third fight since moving down to middleweight. Started at light heavyweight, came over from EFC in South Africa, where he was a 2-division champion, kind of fighting as a light heavyweight, and also was up at heavyweight as sort of just a guy, not a full-blown heavyweight where he's coming in at 240, but kind of fighting at 210, 220. I think he's just one of those guys that it's if he can't get you out of there early, it becomes a slog. We saw that in his fight with Marc-Andre Barrio. We saw it in his fight with Marcus Perez. The piece that's maybe a little concerning to me with him is that he's been gym hopping a little bit here over the last little while. He was at Extreme Couture for a while with Eric Nixick, down at Sanford now. I think it's I'm going to keep switching gyms to find the solution, when the actual solution is he should probably fight at 205 so that the gas tank and the weight cut doesn't take too much from him. And he also it might just be a thing where we always want to talk about, well, if you can just figure out this one thing or just adjust this one thing. It might be that he's not going to figure that out, and this is who he is as a fighter. And so figure out the best way to deploy those things going forward, because he absolutely emptied the gas tank trying to get Cody Brundage out of there and then had nothing left as soon as it started going south. And so if he can figure out a way to manage that just a little more, and I do think 205 probably helps him with that a little bit, because the weight cut isn't as hard, which means he's got a little bit better conditioning overall, you would hope. Maybe that's the way to it, but I'm not sure if we see him back in the octagon after this one.
Yeah, he's now 1-3 in the UFC. That's kind of hard to keep around. And maybe he goes back to EFC in South Africa. I know they're starting to put shows on again. And, it's always great to get an ex-UFC guy. But if he does stick around, hopefully he sticks with the gym, because it's like a quarterback that gets a new coach every season. You learn a different system, different ideologies on the game of football. Same thing with fighting. You got to pick one gym for a little bit here and trust the process, as the Philadelphia 76ers would say. And then, moving on here, bantamweight, Guido Canetti taking on Chris Moutinho. Guido Canetti, the oldest man on this bantamweight roster, at 42 years of age, will be 43 towards the end of December against Chris Moutinho. And I thought Moutinho had it looking good early. was, pushing forward, landing some good shots on Canetti, but Canetti just flipped the switch and was able to turn the fight in his favor up against Moutinho and just rocked him with some big bombs that Chris Taglioni had to jump in and get a standing TKO. I know at the time Moutinho didn't like the stoppage. I thought it was a great stoppage. And for a referee too, who, if, like, I know you're like me, Spencer, pretty much every week, UFC card on social media, Chris Taglioni gets a lot of heat for letting fights go on too long. This one, his judgment call, I thought was perfect. He saved Moutinho from taking an extra bit of shots. And I don't know where we go here from Chris Moutinho. I know he raised his stock with the O'Malley fight, but I don't think you want to be known as the guy that can take damage or the MMA version of a Barry Horowitz in there. Like, you don't want to be that. You want to find a way to maybe, give yourself a pat on the back, Spencer. But I could see Moutinho taking the experience he's had in the UFC, going to, back to a CES or one of his regional promotions out on the Northeast, and just growing from there, because he's still very young. And he just proved he can't really hang with some of those guys at 135 in the UFC right now.
So first and foremost, as a 43-year-old, I'm always going to root for the 42-year-olds going out and getting victories. I am 363 days older than Glover Teixeira, so it's great to see old men winning titles and showing we can still do things. You nailed it with the Chris Taglioni stoppage and with Chris Moutinho. I didn't think his stock rose in the fight with Sean O'Malley. I thought that was a fight that his corner did him a disservice by continuing to send him out there when he was getting the hell kicked out of him. I don't think there's any real valor in being a punching bag. These men and women are putting their health on the line and their livelihood on the line for our entertainment. And I understand that it's impressive to see the toughness and the resolve of somebody to go through that. And we both saw on Saturday, a lot of people say, oh, well, could have let that go. We know Moutinho can take it. That's the wrong decision for me. It shouldn't be, we know he can take it, so let him take more. This was a terrific stoppage. He was out on his feet. I agree with you 100% that he's a guy that just isn't able to compete at this level. And that's just a thing we need to be a little more accepting of and a little more ready to say and speak to with some of these athletes. A lot of people are quick to dismiss fighters coming from Contender Series or the use of the Ultimate Fighter still, or some of these people that are getting opportunities. And I get it. The level of fighter in the UFC has changed over the last 15 years, the last 20 years of the Zuffa era. That's going to happen. But we can also look at a guy like Chris Moutinho and just say, he's not ready to be here. He doesn't have the defensive abilities and he doesn't have the overall game to compete with these guys, because as good as Guido Canetti looked on Saturday, he's still a sub 500 fighter in the UFC. He's tough as nails. He's been in there with some good guys, but he's not somebody that's a world beater. He's a 42-year-old dude that desperately needed a win on Saturday and looked like $1 million. And so if you get the hell kicked out of you to where you're getting standing TKO'd in about 2 minutes against the guy that desperately needed a win, it's time to reassess and have that conversation with yourself and your team. Go back and hit reset. As you said, bunch of great promotions in the Northeast that he can go and shine on and get some opportunities for and see if he can get back. But there's no need to keep running this kid out there and saying, well, we know he can take it. He doesn't need to take it. Go figure it out somewhere else. Don't get put in there into the fire. And fans, please, no more with the let him get beat up more. Early stoppages are always better than late stoppages. It feels 100%. Like every week, right? We get on there and we go, it was early. It was late. We want the Goldilocks stoppage every time, and it's just impossible. So when they stop them early, even if they're, and I didn't think this was early, I agree with you. Perfect stoppage by Chris Taglioni, a guy that historically isn't on the right side of these things. So when they do get stopped early, appreciate it, understand it. It is much better than Chris Moutinho taking 3 or 4 more shots where he's out on his feet and we get something like the fight with Mick Conlon, the boxing match that was going on the same time as this card, right? Out on his feet and takes 1 more shot and gets knocked through the ropes. Obviously, Moutinho's not going to get knocked through the cage, but those extra shots are the ones that are so dangerous. And so great stoppage. Let this guy go and reset somewhere else. And I'll now let you speak because I've talked too long.
No, man, I 100% agree. Like, I'm always a favor of an early stoppage better than someone just getting pummeled because the fan base in general, the casual fan base, they don't look at these athletes as people. They look at them as like video game characters, and you're just button mashing. And oh man, that knockout was great. And Chris Moutinho is a family to go back to. I'd like him to remember them. I'd like him to learn from that experience or be able to talk to family members and friends after the fact. And I think for Moutinho, he's someone who should go. That there's CES, there's CFFC. He's only going to learn from an experience like that he's had in the UFC, and you don't want to just throw him out there. Plus, he's proven like this was a fight with Canetti. He was pretty much given there to get an opportunity to get a win against someone that was on a 3-fight losing streak, the oldest guy on the roster. And usually in this sport, youth beats age. And it didn't work out for him. It's time for Moutinho to go back to the drawing board. And for Canetti, good on him for getting a win at that age and representing his country, Argentina. And for Canetti now, like, I don't know how often we see him. Maybe he gets that fight later on this year with the guy that called him out on this show in Javid Basharat. I don't know. But for Canetti, great for him to get a win. And, just solidify his spot here at bantamweight as not a world beater, but a tough guy anytime you see him on the card. As we wind this down, Spencer, I'll get you out of here quickly as fast as possible here. But we started things off at the light heavyweight division. Amzat Murzakanov versus Tafon Chukwu. And look, Chukwu, both guys coming up from the Contender Series. I thought Chukwu looked excellent in those first 2 rounds, actually using his grappling, putting the fight up against the ground and getting the better of the striking. And I thought it was funny in the corner from Nchukwu's corner saying, we can't let this go to the scorecards. That's true, because you're going to get flying knee from the big Russian launching himself in Murzakanov, a flying knee that just came out of nowhere, flash knocked out Nchukwu. And Murzakanov, once again, remains undefeated, now 11-0, and that's one heck of a way, not only to make your UFC debut, but it started the night off for, you mean this is going to be a special card.
Yeah, when you get comeback victories like that and flying knees from guys that you don't expect to get flying knees from, right? And I joked that maybe calling it a flying knee, it shows you the degrees of flying knees because it was like a 6-inch vertical as opposed to some of these other flying knees that we've seen, as opposed to like Alex Perriera's flying knee in his debut, but a great finish nonetheless. Tafon Chukwu is a guy that I was super high on coming off the Contender Series and coming out of his debut win over Jamie Pickett. I liked a lot of the little things that he did as a relatively inexperienced fighter. And just as I tweeted, did I abandon ship on my guy a little too early because he's going to come out here and get a victory over an undefeated Russian? He gets flying kneed. And so I feel a little bit okay that I've abandoned ship on Tafon Chukwu and taken my mea culpa here of I was a little too high and I got this one all the way wrong. But a great performance by Azamat Murzakanov, who is somebody that, again, just want to see more of, right? This answered the question of, can he hang with guys in the UFC? Now I want to see, can he dial up that conditioning a little bit more? Can he figure out how to meter out all of his expenditure to where he's not exhausted in 4 minutes as he was on Saturday? But to see him still be able to come out guns blazing to start that third, that shows you a little bit too that he understands the situation, he understands the assignment in front of him, and he goes out and gets it done. Great performance, and as you said, just started this wild night of action for us. 5 straight finishes to start the night to set up a really great card overall.
Yeah, for Murzakanov, obviously a UFC debut, so not going to get rushed or anything like that, but you're going to try to remember the name here when he fights again. And when you look at who Murzakanav's fought and where he's fought right in Brave, fighting, he's last guy he fought before the Contender Series fight against Matthias Scheffel was Mohamed Fakhreddin, who's now the light heavyweight and middleweight champion of that Brave promotion and has a win over Andre Muniz on the regional scene. So those are not anyone to
and
sneeze
like a
at.
Win over Andre Muniz.
Yeah, 50-second KO. So that's, nothing to sneeze about. So Murzakanov, a guy that definitely we should keep our eye on at light heavyweight, and a night that we had to keep our eye on because the action was so great overall. And Spencer, I know UFC is going to go back to the Apex, but it feels like this was the end of the Apex era in some capacity. And I'm not going to lie, I'm excited that the UFC is going back on the road, especially London and then the following week to Columbus, Ohio. I'm going to miss the Apex a little bit. It brought some great fights, a whole different atmosphere. And let's be real, it kept the UFC going at a time where a lot of sports leagues were in limbo of even getting seasons out.
I mean, part of the reason that they built that facility, right, that entire facility that includes the PI and the new offices and overall sort of campus headquarters for the UFC, was to be able to have these events and do Contender Series and Ultimate Fighter where it's their own production facility. I don't think when they broke ground on this and started these plans that they foresaw a global pandemic that was going to shift them there for 50 different events. It has been an absolute godsend. It has been terrific as fight fans to get to see this many events during this period that, as you said, so many other sports had to really shut it down for long stretches or not have fans, and it just didn't feel the same. It didn't always feel the same, but there was a dynamic to it and a feel to it that was different and really cool. I'm going to miss the small cage. I look forward to the wild fans next weekend in London that are just going to be absolutely crazy. I look forward to my guy John Gooden being back on the call, but I too want to see some of these. Like, don't stray away from the Apex for too long. Come back for 1 or 2 fights every 2 months. Mix a couple in if you don't have a venue somewhere else. Just bring it back because it's been fun, and I know the athletes have enjoyed it as well. Right? It makes it easier when you know what you're getting into. You know the surroundings. You can hear your coaches. We heard a bunch of people talk about that on Saturday and throughout this 50-fight run. So don't stay away for too long, but very much excited to see live action back on the road, back in front of live crowds, because I know both the people in London, the people in Columbus, and everywhere else that they're going to go after that have been dying to see this action back in front of them.
I think a lot of fans are excited to see the UFC go back out on the road. That London card's going to be insane. The British MMA fan base for combat sports and all, I should say, especially as you said, that Lee Wood Conlon fight that was in Nottingham, England, at the same time as this card was. The energy was electric. It'll be electric the night before with the Cage Warriors card, which should be one of the better Cage Warriors cards this year for their first show in the UK. It's going to be great to see them back out on the road. But yeah, I'm going to miss that small cage. I'm not going to lie. The small cage being gone definitely is going to affect a little bit of enjoyment, especially with the bigger guys in there where they're kind of just forced to meet in the center of the cage. So it's going to be interesting to see them get back out on the road and touring. And as well, other places are starting to open up. So it looks like the Apex days are slowly but surely fading away. And, maybe for sure by 2023, it's back to the old days where, they're running one show in North America, then a pay-per-view in Vegas, and then, Europe, Asia, wherever it may be. And they have other markets that they want to hit as well going on forward. But Spencer, I've kept you here long enough. We recapped the entire UFC Vegas 50 card, and it was definitely a gem of a card. Pleasure chatting with you. Before I let you go, Spencer, plug some of your work and some of the work you have coming up in the week, because you've got all these great features on the UFC website and, of course, your Keyboard Kimura Substack.
I mean, you did a great job off the top and just there as well. Everything, the name is on the screen right now. Just follow me on Twitter at Spencer Kyte. I shamelessly promote everything when it goes live. I have an actual newsletter through review that is pinned to my Twitter called My Week in Words. Great artwork by our mutual friend, Dave Fretz. It is just a compilation every Saturday morning of all the things that I've put out. So if you don't want to follow through the week and click day to day, you can just pull that up on Saturday morning, get all caught up on everything going into fight night on Saturday night. But between this card coming up in London, I've turned in my stuff for that. I'm super looking forward to it. Some really great prospects. I write a series called Fighters on the Rise that I'm really proud of putting out over these last 4 or 5 years, highlighting some of these up and coming talents. This card next weekend has a ton of those. I'll have some features later in the week with the headliners, Alexander Volkanovski and Tom Aspinall. The Substack, the Keyboard Kimura, is going to be a little bit reduced this week because we're trying to get through and figure out a move and an open house and things like that. So I gotta focus on the house stuff as opposed to the work stuff. But I'll still have some stuff out there as well. And as I said, the Twitter will have all of it anyways. I really appreciate being able to jump on here with you, man, and look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, I look forward to chatting with you again, Spencer. Obviously, follow Spencer on Twitter. Keep up with his great work. He's working on the house, meaning he's going to get a move on, and we got to get a move on here as we've been here with an hour and a half. But Spencer, a pleasure chatting with you. We'll definitely set this up at some point later on this year to go over a UFC event. But thanks for your time, man, and have yourself a great rest of your week, and good luck with that move.
You too, man. Thank you.